grab my glasses.
Oh, next up is Storm. So he's got to get his glasses on and papers all set up.
Otherwise, the words will be all blurry. I will simply start by saying that this takes place relatively close to here. It's not noted specifically in the pages, but it's a little bit further north and absolutely right on the coast. This is the Yule House Experiment. By the winter of 1978, the house on Belmere Hill had been empty for so long that people stopped believing anyone had ever lived there at all. It stood above the northern coast like a silhouette carved out of midnight. Its roofline jagged saw against the bruised sky, its windows blind and black, its long stone steps strangled by frostbitten ivy. Storms found it first. Snow gathered there deepest. Wind lost its way around the corners and stayed, worrying the eaves, making the gutters mutter and the shutters tremble. You could stand at the base of the hill and feel, without any superstition at all, that the place did not sleep so much as it waited. Once it had a name, Vorik House, after the rail magnate who built it. Elias Vorik had filled it with polished wood and imported glass, with heavy carpets and delicate figurines, and a wife who died early, and 2 children who did not die early enough. On Christmas Eve, 1904, a blizzard sealed Belmere Hill in white. By morning, both of the children were found dead in the nursery, their bodies curled toward the window as if listening for carols that never came. The official word was exposure. Unofficially, no one talked about it at all. Vorik boarded the doors, barred the windows, dismissed the servants, and vanished from every readable record. His house did not. It remained intact and unrotted, watching the town grow and forget it. Locals said the house didn't want visitors. It wanted witnesses. So, of course, the Eastern Sleep Institute chose it for a study. They came up the drive 2 nights before Christmas, 7 of them, in parkas and knit caps, boots crunching the frozen gravel. Breath plumed in front of their faces, white and quick in the iron-cold air. Dr. Theodore Harland led the group, shoulders hunched, carrying a metal case full of forms and instruments. Behind him trudged Marjorie Bell, acoustic engineer, dragging a coil of cable like a dead snake and muttering about humidity. Paul Whitcomb and Lena Ivers walked together, 2 bright-eyed grad students in psychology trading theories about expectation bias. Robert Klein, the behavioral tech, smoked a cigarette down to the filter and stamped it in the snow at the foot of the stairs. Evelyn Shaw, the historian, took everything in with the distant, hungry expression of someone cataloging for a book she'd already been started in her head. Daniel Mercer came last, carrying the portable recorder and a box of tapes. He paused once, halfway up the steps, to look up at the house. It looked back. That was the first impression he had, not a metaphor, but a sensation, that the dark panes of glass, blind for decades, were giving him a slow, measuring once over. By the time he blinked, the feeling was gone, carried off on a gust of wind that tasted like old soot. "Daniel," Harlan called, "you with us, or communing with the architecture?" "Just take it in," Daniel said as he hurried up the last few steps. The front door opened on the 3rd turn of a reluctant key. Cold air rolled out in a dry, breathless wave, sharper than the winter outside. Daniel felt it find his teeth and settle in his bones. The foyer lights came on with a stuttering hum as the generator at the rear of the property came to life. Yellow bulbs flickered into being overhead, revealing an interior that should have been sagging and broken with age, but was not. The staircase that rose from the foyer was grand, curling, an iron spine with polished wooden ribs. The wallpaper held its faded patterns. The chandeliers still hung like clusters of glass teeth. Dust lay thick as velvet on surfaces, but nothing had collapsed. Nothing had surrendered. "It's preserved," Evelyn murmured. "Time doesn't usually let buildings stay this proud." "Lucky for us," Harlan said. "We wanted atmosphere, didn't we?" They set about decorating the corpse. To evoke structured holiday nostalgia, the experiment required them to transform the main floor into a proper Christmas environment. Boxes of garlands, glass ornaments, strings of lights and tinsel were lugged in from the van and distributed like offerings throughout the house. Paul hammered a nail into an old beam to secure a swath of evergreen and paused, frowning. "What is it?" Lena said. "Wood's too soft," he said, "like it's wet." She touched the beam. The surface was dry and smooth beneath her fingers. Old varnish, old dust. "Feels fine to me." He shrugged and went back to his work. Still, every time he lifted the hammer, Daniel noticed the house seemed to flinch, just a little. Not physically, nothing so obvious, but there was something about the way the sound of each strike carried, as if the walls were bracing for it. By dusk, the tree stood in the main hall, a tall, conical monster of fir, broad at the base, its top brushing the ceiling like a supplicant reaching toward heaven. Glass baubles watched the room with bulging eyes. A garland of tinsel caught the light and threw it in quicksilver shivers across the walls. Fire roared in the grate. Marjorie had rigged the microphones in the hall, their thin black cords curling under rugs and alongside baseboards like veins fed back to the reel-to-reel deck Daniel had set on a side table. "All right," Harlan said, consulting his clipboard. "First ritual, carol sequence, 8 p.m. sharp. Traditional melodies only. Observe emotional and psychological response." Translation, Robert said. "We sing some old songs and see who cries first." They gathered near the tree. The recorder wheels began to turn, tape whispering from one reel to the other. The first verse was hesitant, 7 voices trying to find the same path through a familiar tune. The second grew fuller, sound layering in the air. By the third, the acoustics of the halls were all wrong. Dashing through the snow, the house held their voices too long. Notes stretched, bent, looped. An echo arrived, a heartbeat before the line it answered. A harmony that none of them were singing braided itself into the chords. Marjorie stopped. "Did you hear that?" "Keep going," Harlan said, more briskly than the moment deserved. "We need the bass line." They sang again. Now there were other voices, higher, lighter. Children. They danced at the edges of the sound, darting in and out of the auditory field, like fish, too quick to grasp, too clear to dismiss. When they finished, the last note did not so much fade as it got swallowed. "Perfect," Harlan said, forcing a smile. "See? Already interesting." At 9:12, while they were logging their impressions, Paul jerked his head toward the upstairs landing. Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Lena asked. "Laughing." They all listened. The house gave them only the crackle of fire and the soft tick of selling wood. "Probably your imagination," Harlan said, writing. "That's data too." At 11:44, the temperature in the hall rose 12 degrees in under a minute. No one had touched the thermostat. No one had fueled the fire. They stayed up to set the dining table for the next phase of the study. 7 plates, 7 glasses, 7 sets of silverware, laid in clinical precision. At midnight, when Lena went to refill the water pitcher, she stopped. "Did we do this?" she asked. The others looked. Somewhere between 11:50 and midnight, without anyone acknowledging the act, an 8th place had been set on the table. Plate, glass, fork, knife, spoon, napkin folded like a little cradle. "Probably a prank," Robert said. though his voice wasn't convinced. Somebody trying to get in the mood? No one claimed it. They went to bed uneasy in strange rooms that smelled like stale perfume and old pine, and woke late, as if the house had reluctantly allowed it. Evelyn did not wake. They found her on the second floor just after 9 when she failed to report to the morning briefing. The door they thought was a linen closet now opened into a small, perfect nursery, preserved in a bubble of air that smelled faintly of dust and talcum powder. Pale blue stags bounded across the wallpaper. A wooden rocking horse stared at the window with flaking eyes. Evelyn sat in the nursery closet, knees drawn up, one hand braced the floor, the other curled against her chest. Her eyes, wide open, filmed white. Her fingernails were gone, not torn, not broken, just absent. The soft pads of her fingers were smeared with gray, as if she was trying to claw through something that turned to powder under her touch. When Daniel reached out, dust puffed from her lips and nostrils. It was old dust. The smell of boxes untouched in attics for decades, of curtains that had turned to paper, of pages that might crumble if read. He staggered back, throat burning. "Heart failure," Harlan said, too loudly over the rising panic. "This is shock, all right? We stay calm, we mark it, we get her out. There are procedures." No one said what they were all thinking. The door had been locked from the inside, and Evelyn had not the key. They should have left. They didn't. Whether out of professional pride, stubbornness, or simple inertia of being too deep into something to climb back out, they followed the protocol. That night, the carols sounded different. They stood in the main hall again, beneath the chandelier's glass grin, and sang because the schedule told them to. The house did not wait politely this time. It joined in immediately. Children's voices from the walls, the ceiling, the dark spaces behind the plaster. "Frosty the Snowman." "Mark it," Harlan said through the teeth. "Keep going." Forks moved by themselves at dinner. Food disappeared from untouched plates in small, greedy bites. Once Daniel felt a faint brush of something cold and weightless against his knuckles, as if a small hand were trying to take his wrist and guide it. At 9:31, the faint, bright jingle of bells drifted from the servants' corridor at the rear of the kitchen. "We didn't bring any bells," Marjorie said. Robert, ever the one who couldn't resist a hallway, grabbed a flashlight. "I'll check it out. Try not to get murdered while I'm gone." He vanished down the narrow passage. The echo of his footsteps went on too long, retreating into a distance that should never have existed in a house of this size. When he didn't return after 15 minutes, they went looking. The servant corridor stretched farther than it had that afternoon. It was wrong in small ways. The angle of the walls, the pitch of the floor, the way that the ceiling seemed to lean down, listening. Halfway down, the beam from Lena's flashlight picked out a set of boot prints. They were sunk into the wooden planks as if the boards had been soft clay when Robert stepped there and then hardened around his feet. Each print showed the tread pattern in detail, toes pointed deeper into the corridor, no turning, no coming back. "Maybe he found a way through," Harlan said. "Through what?" Lena asked. No one answered. They called his name until the house threw back echoes, thin and mocking. Robert Klein did not come back. The panic that had been building quietly since they found Evelyn began at last to show itself. It happened quickly after that. At 10:02, a scream sounded from the direction of the servants' staircase, a raw, tearing sound that sliced through conversation and drove everyone toward it at once. The staircase was a steep, narrow thing at the end of the corridor, led by a single bulb that seemed a long way up. As they reached the foot of it, the wooden steps heaved beneath a force none of them could see. The structure flexed, timbers groaning like ribs trying to breathe after being nailed shut. "Paul!" Lena shouted. "Did you get up there?" The scream came again from somewhere above, a human sound flayed by terror. Paul charged up the first 3 steps. On the 4th, the stairway folded. It didn't collapse like a rotten structure. It moved like a muscle, wood bent and met itself, like the gap at the center, closing like a mouth around a bite. For a heartbeat, Daniel saw Paul framed between the closing treads, eyes wide, reaching back. Then he was gone. The steps sealed with a splintering crack. The hallway went quiet, save for the frantic rasp of their own breathing. "Emergency exit," Harlan said, voice shaking. "We still have the front doors, windows. We can..." I swallowed hard. "We can still go." Lena didn't wait. She spun and ran, shoes slipping on the polished floor, her breath thin, constant "no, no, no," as she tore through the foyer toward the main floors. "Lena, stop! Wait!" Daniel shouted. She seized the handles and flung open the doors. On the other side, there should have been iced over steps, the winding drive, the distant glow of the town below. Instead, there was snow. A corridor of falling snow, stretching forward into a whiteness that had no horizon. It did not appear to be outdoors, not entirely. The air beyond the threshold had weight and direction, like water in a tunnel. Shapes moved in and out, just beyond clarity. Daniel thought of fish under ice. Lena stared. "No," she whispered, "no, I'm not." The wind reached through, took hold of her coat, and pulled. She grabbed the doorframe. Frost bloomed around her fingers, creeping fast, turning her knuckles bloodless. For a second, Daniel thought they might be able to reach her. Then her grip slipped on the building ice, and the snow swallowed her whole. The door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the glass. Daniel stood there with his hand outstretched, the echo of her being pulled away, beating in his eardrums. "That's it," Marjorie said. Her voice had a thin, high edge to it. High edge. It hadn't the day before. "We're done! We're done, Harlan! You understand? There is no study. That's just a house eating us!" Harlan began. Light flickered overhead. The bulbs in the chandelier buzzed and flared, then steadied, brighter than before. The garlands along the stair rail shivered, as if brushed by invisible arms. Tinsel trembled, throwing sparks of reflected light across the walls. Somewhere above them, a door creaked itself open. The sound of children's voices slipped down the stairwell, excited, breathless, overlapping. "Let us finish," they sang, not quite in words, but meaning was there. Let us finish Christmas." The 8th place at the table waited patiently in the hall, its glass catching the light like a watching eye. "Move," Harlan said. "We need to get to a window. Any window. Break it if we have to. We can..." Marjorie had already started for the staircase, meaning to cut across and reach the upper landing where the long row of front windows stood. The banister under her hand was smooth, worn by hands long gone. It wrapped around her wrist like a living thing. She had one instant to scream before the carved wood twisted with obscene flexibility, dragging her sideways, flinging her into the hollow center of the staircase. Her body hit the underside of the second floor landing with a wet, cracking sound and dropped out of sight. Harlan bolted for the nearest front window. It stood tall and immaculate, glass clouded faintly with condensation on the inside. He didn't bother with a chair this time. He simply drove his elbow into it hard. The glass did not shatter. It accepted the blow as if it were water, the surface dimpling to take his arm in, up to the shoulder. He jerked backwards and could not move. The glass clung, thick and clear, around his flesh, "Help me!" he said, voice breaking. "Help!" The house took him in small, slow increments, drawing him forward, ribs compressing under the frame as if the window had decided to try to wear him. His scream stretched tiny and thin as his head passed through and then cut off. The glass smoothed over behind him, leaving not a crack. There was only one left now. Daniel stood in the ruin of the foyer, chest heaving, the recorder still humming on the side table as if none of this were outside its brief. The house hummed with warmth, the air thick and almost humid. Ornaments drooped on their hooks. Wax from the candles on the mantel ran in glistening, fleshy rivulets and pooled like congealing fat. "Don't," he whispered to himself, "don't call my name. Don't say I'm next. Don't give it the satisfaction." Somewhere above, a lullaby began. Soft, sweet, sung in voices that overlapped and braided together into something like a hymn and something like a prayer. "And now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep." Daniel did not know where he was going until he was already running. He took the stairs 2 and 3 at a time, dodging splinters, following a pole that felt like a choice and more like a current. The house twisted around him as he climbed, hallways stretching and contracting, doors opening into rooms that replayed fragments of other winters. Wrapping papers strewn like flayed skin, candles burning down past safety, a tree toppling in a corner, the sound of someone weeping in a bedroom they couldn't bear to leave. Hands pressed outward from the walls as he passed, small palms, fingers splayed, the wallpaper straining but not quite tearing. Breath fogged from the keyholes. Footprints appeared on the ceiling overhead, running rapidly away. At the very center of it all, where the house's bones converged, a chimney rose. It was wide enough for a man, blackened from countless fires, warm even now. Heat rolled out of it in slow exhalations, tasting of ash and resin and something else, spice and sugar and the metallic tang of burned offerings. Daniel stared up into the darkness and knew with certainty that bypassed thought that this was the throat. He did not climb, he was taken. An invisible force seized him under his arms, not cruel, not rough, but inexorable. His feet left the floor. The bricks slid past his shoulders, his back, his boots, scraping but not bruising, the space miraculously wide enough where it needed to be. For a moment, he had a sick, unmistakable impression of being welcomed, of being drawn upward like a child lifted from the cradle. Below him, the house began to sing. He was taken all the way up to the roof. There he could see from the windows a glow. It wasn't fire because the flames didn't burst through it, but they continued to glow, and the house began to bellow and gurgled, and it was coming inward and inward. It was an implosion that continued as he stood there, and it was starting to go black. And as it did, he had this unnerving carol that ended in this guttural thing. The most wonderful time of the year. And it went black. They found him at the tree line at dawn, half bruised in the snow, clothes scorched but intact, skin unburned. His hair smelled like smoke and pine and something that made the rescue workers uncomfortable, though they couldn't have said what. He woke in a hospital bed 3 days later with his throat raw and his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper that never quite recovered. When they asked him what happened up there, he tried to explain. It wasn't killing us, Daniel said. That's not the right word. The man from the Institute leaned forward. The others are dead, Mr. Mercer. I know, Daniel said. I watched it. I felt it. But that's not what it wanted. Well, then what did it want? He stared at the ceiling, listening for carols that might never stop hearing. They were trying to finish Christmas, he whispered. They never got to finish. The kids, Vorik's kids. It was all waiting. All these years, it was waiting for someone who would come in and do it properly. Decorations, carols, dinner, laughter. That's what woke it up. You think the house is haunted by children? He almost laughed. The sound came out rough and joyless. No, not haunted, inhabited. They learned the shape of the house from the inside. They learned how to move it, how to use it, and how... He swallowed hard. His tongue tasted like ash. Now they know how to do it. Now they know how Christmas goes. The tapes from the Belmere house were sealed. The remains of the house, such as they were entombed in concrete. The hill was declared unstable, off limits to hikers and thrill seekers. Just another piece of land the state meant to forget. December, however, did not forget. Most of the stories you'll hear around that part of the coast are just that, stories. Kids daring one another to climb the fence, couples necking in parked cars, swearing they saw lights where no house stood anymore. But every once in a while, when the snow is falling hard and the town below is wrapped in its own glittering rituals, odd things happen on the edges. A warm breeze ghosting through an alley in the middle of a blizzard, carrying the faint sound of children singing. A cluster of footprints appearing overnight on a porch where no one had walked, small and bare, circling once and then gone. Lights flickering deep between the pines on Belmere Hill in colors too steady and organized to be lighting. And some families, just past midnight on Christmas Eve, open their doors to bring in a forgotten package or take the dog out and find something waiting, a plate, a glass, a neatly folded napkin set with care. An empty place laid out as if for a child who has been waiting late for dinner for a very, very long time. If they clear it away, nothing happens. If they leave it there, sometimes, just sometimes, they wake in the night to the sound of small hands clapping into light and the soft, unmistakable crackle of wrapping paper from a room that used to be their own. Because a house on a hill learned how, as the story goes, and something inside it, something that used to be children, is still trying to get Christmas right.